Now, one of the things that we typically cover really quickly with folks at something like this, you might be asking, what exactly does Amazon Web Services do with spatial computing? Yeah. Right? Typically, we think about spatial, we think about a headset, we think about 3D out there, in some way. Well, from our perspective, and this is when we look at this maturity curve for spatial compute, we really see ourselves as how do we take this technology that previously was very much about innovation, early adoption, we're trying to understand what it does, and bring it into maturity through scaling, extensibility, security, resiliency, right? These are the tenets of what we do at AWS anyway, right? If anyone's familiar with our well-architected framework, it's very much aligned with that. And from our perspective, it's how we build very scalable, extensible experiences. Now, with that in mind, you might be saying, why have dedicated spatial specialists? And the answer to that is quite simply, as you all know in the room, or most of you know, spatial experiences are very complex, right? 3D data is very complex. And so at its core, our spatial team is really focused on how do we best manage that data, right? Because if you can manage it well, and I'll explain the different parts of that management, you're then going to be able to make it more useful, right? You can deliver it to more places, you can do more with it. So for us, we really focus on this concept of a spatial data plane. Right? Now, a data plane, control plane, these are very classic IT terms, but by thinking of a spatial data plane as a unique a piece of your, let's say, your enterprise strategy, but even if you're an ISV who's building a SaaS or PaaS, for example, still very critical. That spatial data plane focuses on 3 core areas. And the visual for that spatial data plane is so good, and I swear when the tech fixes, I will show it to you. But for now, you're gonna have to let me just paint that picture. So, first part of the spatial data plane is ingress, right? How are we getting that data into the cloud? And I like to stress that for us, spatial data is not just 3D pixels, right? It's not just polygons. Spatial data can be 3D data that we think of as 3D data, from CAD all the way through tessellated geometry. But it can also be things like point clouds. It could be IoT data that's tied to a physical space. It can be just that concept of if we were to map voxels in a room, right? Everything has an XYZ. And in theory, everything has an XYZT, and suddenly you look at delta over time. How does a space change, right? That is spatial data. And so if we take that, whether it's polygons, whether it's just physical space data, and we say, what do we need to do with that? How do we better manage that? For us, that's the spatial data lake, right? If you're familiar with the concept of a data lake in the cloud, it's effectively how do you take just massive quantities of data, unstructured data, structured data, doesn't really matter, and actually unlock the value and power of that. Oh, hey, look at that. All right. I hope I don't disappoint now that you see the visual. No? Aha. Hey, Kimate, did you give them this deck?
No, this is my deck, so.
Okay. Okay. So, we'll see how this goes.
Sure.
Hey, there we go. Look at that. Location, time, behavior, 3D space. We got 14 minutes left, so I'm just going to breeze through this here. Spatial data lake in the middle. So this is, the core thing here is storage and metadata. How do we take spatial data, which is inherently complex, and when we start to look at some of these new ways of thinking of spatial data, think about NVIDIA's Omniverse, right? They use USD, Universal Scene Descriptor. What makes USD powerful? Well, it's got an extensible schema. The good thing about that, you can do a lot with it. The difficult thing about that is that you need to manage that metadata, right? You need to understand how that breaks out, how that breaks down. And then if you think about all that data, you need to ultimately change that data, manipulate that data, optimize that data, right? You can't run CAD in a runtime application. You have to change it, right? So if you're an enterprise where you've got 7 business units all using similar variations of the same data, but not quite the same data, that becomes problematic. And of course, you have to distribute it, have access to it, make it secure. So the thing about that is why this is important and why I'm actually going to talk to you about Gen AI. If you properly manage that data, it can unlock so much potential for what you can do with that data. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Finally, the spatial data endpoints. This is what we're very familiar with. How do we render that data? How do we distribute that data, learn from that data, analytics, et cetera. And so generative AI at AWS. By the way, one thing I want to talk about for that spatial data lake, we actually have a service called Visual Asset Management System. It's actually not a service, it's an open source repository. We'll get you those links after the fact, I guess. It is something that you can actually implement in your own spatial data lake in an open source way. So we'll share that with all of you. But generative AI, probably the reason most of you are here. So the key considerations for Gen AI at AWS right now and moving forward, is how do you move quickly, how do you customize, and how do you scale? Sounds very familiar, right? So generative AI applications, much like spatial applications, if we want to scale them, it's not just the application itself, right? It's not just what's on the headset, or in the case of generative AI, it's not just what you see at the surface. There's all of this data foundation. And that's what we do at AWS, right? We are a data foundation. We have all of this great infrastructure that can unlock so much of this potential up above the water. And what does that actually look like? Well, we have a ton of tools here. Some of you may be familiar. I don't know, quick show of hands, how many of you use AWS? Fantastic. So a lot of you are probably very familiar with the stuff that you see for like our actual FM training and inference. Things like our GPUs, Trainium, SageMaker is our full suite of AI/ML tools that we've had out for quite some time. And you can do everything from very customized training all the way up to very basic kind of GUI-driven but very powerful AI tools. And that's where the stuff that you're seeing up here, this is our newer things. If you've been following us in the news, you've heard our announcements around things like Amazon Bedrock, which allows you to build things with other LLMs, other FMs. You can train and tune them to meet your own needs. And then Amazon Q, which this is something where you can actually, depending on the application, and I'll talk about this in a moment, you can use it using your own business data to generate realistic insights that are very applicable. You can use it to help improve your coding and your building development process. Really powerful stuff. And so Bedrock gives you a choice of the leading foundational models all through a single API. Think of it as kind of an aggregator where you can very easily pass in a prompt, pass into an API, get a response. And what that enables depends on what you're trying to do, depending on which FM you use, right? It could be something like Stable Diffusion, where you're trying to get imagery out. Could be something like AWS or Amazon Titan, where this is our own model around both text and image. Could be something like Claude from Anthropic, where some really deep natural language processing there. So model customization, RAG, agents, but of course we do it all very securely, very privately. This is, it's all your environment, just like everything else that we do on AWS. And so a lot of really cool benefits for those of you who are building something custom. Now, Amazon Q, on the other hand, this is really, how do we use the power of, kind of these early use cases we're seeing around assistance, right? How do we use Gen AI to assist us in completing tasks faster with better data or more insightful data, or even data we hadn't thought about before? And so Amazon Q actually allows you to take your business data as it exists, take those data sources, build them with your enterprise systems, and scale them. So it's there where you work. Your users don't have to be technical users, and really is kind of industry-leading assistance. Additionally, though, if you are builders, if you do have technical folks, Amazon Q has a really fantastic integration with Visual Studio Code, and it can help you with generatively making recommendations for how you code and best practice there. So I highly recommend, for all the devs in the room, please go check that out. So this is a quick way of thinking about where the Amazon Q services can fit. Again, I'm not going to go through each of these individually. We're really short on time, but we will pass out the deck. You'll be able to watch recordings after. And I urge you all, feel free to please reach out to us. We can get you more information. So how does that combine with Spatial, right? I think why we're really all here. So the sky really is the limit. The reason we take the approach that we take with Spatial in general, with AWS in general, infrastructure, but also with generative AI. What does it look like to combine those? Well, you tell us, right? It's entirely up to you. We give you the tools, you make it whatever it is you want to make it. So for example, we have a really great use case here that we showcased at reInvent last year, which is our annual AWS conference. And I happen to really love this one because it goes a step further than just saying, if I ask a computer a question and it gives me an answer, is that helpful, right? The answer can be yes, but not necessarily. But if I ask a computer to help me understand something, not just give me an answer, but help me understand something, then it becomes really impactful. And that's what some of our builders have done here, one of whom is in the room, David Israel, sitting right here in the front row. And what they did was they used Unreal Engine and MetaHuman and said, if we were to pass in voice prompts, what can that do to help unlock different ways of interacting with different people, with different languages, different communication? And what I think is really cool about this, so American Sign Language, which I personally, I'm obviously familiar with, but I've never learned it. I don't have a lot of context. There isn't a one-to-one translation for everything that we have in American English when spoken. And so sometimes that creates a whole lot of times where someone has to sign all of the letters, right? It can be very time-consuming. And particularly when we look at things like idioms or idiomatic expressions or some more obscure words, right? But what if we could use the power of generative AI to actually take in those words and those expressions and translate them to something that actually applies really well to ASL, and then use that to play back an actual 3D avatar signing back to you, right? If you're trying to learn ASL, if you're trying to communicate to someone who might be auditorily impaired. Really powerful tool. And you can see here, this is one of many images on the right of people engaging with this at reInvent and just really seeing the power that this could do. So we're really pleased to announce, this is a video. Sorry, let's go ahead and, yeah.
Hit the button. Sorry.
Well, try that one more time. See what we get. There we go. So imagine someone is putting in a voice prompt and saying, asking for the thing to translate. And you can see here up at the top, it takes that Gen AI simplification and says, what does that then translate to in ASL? Right, so here's to an excellent Thanksgiving with abundant turkey. And present Thanksgiving food good to eat. And in a positive sentiment, right? So you can do sentiment analysis. You can focus on, whatever types of properties you want to tweak, right? And ultimately, you can easily see how if you were to integrate something like this into a headset or an experience that you are doing with a tablet or a phone, it can really unlock a lot of potential. And it doesn't, of course, have to be ASL. It could be any language, right? But ultimately, very powerful. And we're very pleased to announce today that we're actually launching a guidance that is publicly available for how to build this sort of thing yourself. This is the architecture itself, and you'll see here, when you go through this, you'll see that it's actually taking in the data, it's doing all the NLP, it's actually going through and doing more than just, hey, let's do it all locally on machine. But it is still very fast, very quick, very lightweight. It's JSON back and forth. And so I highly urge you all to check that out. We'll get that link out to everybody. And then in the next few months, we're actually going to be releasing the code for this. So you'll have a sample available to you that's been vetted by our application security folks, and you'll be able to actually take that and go build it yourself. So really excited to announce that. We'll publish a blog post this week to our Spatial blog, and that'll get you all the information you need. But if you are interested, go ahead and Google. You can do AWS Solutions Library, and if you navigate through that to the Spatial section, that'll get you information to go ahead and do that. All right. Kimate, I'm sorry, I tried. Go as quickly as I could.
No worries, no worries. You guys can hear me, right? And I can yell, it's fine. The cool thing for me about AWS is we have a bunch of services that in coordination can make your productivity so much faster. Given that we have a little bit of time, I'm probably going to skip all the demos that I was planning on showing you. But one thing that we focus on is trying to make life simple. Am I echoing? Is it really bad? How about that? Is that better? All right, I'll even bring it down further. Is that better? Sweet. All right, okay. One of the things that we focus on is trying to make developers' lives easier, just in general. Do you want me to use that? Because it sounds like it's... Get rid of this. Oh, just keep going? All right, everybody's cool with it. So we have this tool called AWS Amplify, and the tool focuses on making it so that you, the mostly front-end engineers that we all are, can build tools that correspondingly have a back-end. So if you think about all the things that your front-end tools might want to show, especially if you're building like 3D applications, 3D games, those kinds of things, this allows you to focus on that front-end core experience while having a back-end be deployed for you. So all the server-side stuff that you might not ever want to think about working on, but that you need, will be available to you as constructs. So storage, authentication, database, push notifications, some machine learning also is available to you there. So this is the kind of UI of it running. You can click around and see what's going on there. So you type in AWS Amplify, and there you go. Another thing you can do is build your front ends using Figma. So Figma is a tool that allows you to develop a user experience. There are a bunch of drag and drop constructs. And then straight from Figma, we can go straight into Amplify. It's all one system, and then deploy your applications. It's not as simple as this. It sounds super simple the way I'm saying it, but you are able to build out user experience. It does generate some code if you want to utilize code in iOS and Android and web. So this is another tool that we have. What we've done is taken those AWS Amplify tools and created this walkthrough that's available to you if you go to our AWS blogs. And you go into Spatial, which is a category in blogs, and you'll see that's my name, Kimate Richards there, and Adam wrote these blogs that work with AWS Amplify and the Vision Pro. We're going to do the same thing for Unity-based applications very soon. So you'll see the same thing for Quest. And it really goes through step by step. Here's how you have a user log in. Here are the steps to log in. Here's the steps to creating a database, storage, getting your models from the web down to your machines and devices. And the reason why this is important is, yes, you're going to create great application experiences, but if you notice using Quest or Vision Pro, if you start to bring in multiple models and you start to try to have this dynamic environment, quickly you run out of memory. So you want to start to get these things from the cloud. You want to start managing your users in cloud. Mentioned the visual asset management system, so I'm actually going to skip this. We also have, and I'm going to skip this too as well, if you want to actually build and run on a Mac in the cloud, and I love this because a lot of times I'll be out on a plane or out overseas and doing things, and I don't want to have my Macs with me and all these different things. I can run code development as well as my build pipeline on the cloud. Just log in from wherever I want to log in, make a change I want to make, push it, and now it's exposed to the rest of my group. So I'm going to skip that time. But one thing I want to say in the last few minutes before I even get to the rest of the slides is we'll have a demo of some of the things that I'm about to show you running in the expo hall. If you look for the big giant spot robot dog in the back by the I think it's the XR museum sitting right there, you'll be able to see this running in a demo. Building full-featured use cases. This is direct from Meta, so this is not ours. But what Meta is doing is working on this remote training or just virtual training use case. Building a use case like this and others, like here's a use case for healthcare in Vision Pro. Building these kinds of use cases are really simple on AWS. One, we have purpose-built services for these things. And it's a matter of you just connecting the dots between something like this and our services. So these are services like Health Scribe, Health Lake, that correspond directly with the application you just saw. Same thing, productivity. We have, again, services like was mentioned before, Amazon Q. And in Q, you can connect all of your data sources in one place and then have that front end that you were looking at just a second ago expose all of those kinds of use cases. I was going to show a live demo. We're going to save that for if you go to the Expo Hall. So if you come to the Expo Hall, we have a couple of Vision Pros sitting out there, and you'll be able to see a live demo of Amazon Q, Amazon Bedrock running on device. And you might be able to play the spot as well while you're over there. So I encourage you, probably in about the next 20 minutes, we'll start running that demo. But I want to thank you. Any questions, comments? We have a ton of resources that are available to you if you go to AWS Spatial blog or AWS Solutions Library. Those are probably two places that you're best served. And have a great conference. Thanks, and I did it in time. Yes.